Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tennis and Bagels podcast. I am Owen, your only main host today, but with me I have Jack Edward from the On the Line podcast and website. Jack, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Thanks, Owen. Always happy to be here. I was asked by Vance, and always Vance has been on a million times now. My own podcast, so always happy to repay the favour and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's sort of fun how we have all the sort of cross appearances going on all our respective sites, like Talking Tennis, Popcorn Tennis, your blog, podcast. I feel like we're all appearing on each other's shows now, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, it's a bit of a community, isn't it? I like it.
Yeah, it's nice. So we saw a pretty good tennis match just now between Iga Swiatek and Barbara Krejcikova. What were your general thoughts on it? Because there's a lot to unpack with it. It was a great match.
There's tons. I mean, there's there's a million bits of history to go along with this match, right? From Swiatek's side, there's a head-to-head. I don't even know where to start, to be honest. Obviously, everybody knows Swiatek's record, right? In finals, last 10 finals, she's won them all in straight sets. She, barely dropped games in those sets. It was just unreal. Everybody knew it was going to have to be something special to even get close to Swiatek, and she was up 5-1 in the first set, and it looked as though it was going to be plain sailing, basically. So that was the first thing that surprised me, I guess. But the fact that Krejcikova started to come back, it wasn't too surprising. I mean, we'd seen it the last match they had in Rome when Krejcikova had 2 match points. I mean, that was on clay. So, if you can get 2 match points against Swiatek on clay, you can trouble her anywhere. And it wasn't too surprising when she started to make that comeback, and it looked like it looked like it could have went either way from the get-go, I guess, after it got to 5-all.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought about this match was that Krejcikova is back, right? She was ranked number 2 earlier this year. Injury issues, had a tough first round loss at Roland Garros where she was defending champion. But you put up a performance like this against the world number 1, and I don't think there's any doubt that she can get right back to where she was, possibly even exceed that. Because, I mean, the performance today, the play under pressure, I think playing and winning a 3-hour match against Iga Swiatek, and this is getting a little more specific now, but the way she served in that last game was amazing to me because the pressure was so high, right? Because that third set, I don't think either player had a break point, and then suddenly Krejcikova broke at love. But then the last game is going to get tight in a match like this, and 15-all, she just starts raining down unreturnable first serves. It was amazing. It was like she didn't feel the pressure at all.
Yeah, I've got 2 things to say in that. First thing is the serve, and I suppose that's getting a little bit more into the matchup, which I'll flesh out in a second. But certainly for Krejcikova, her favourite serve's got to be that slider in the juice court, and there's not many female players that hit that serve especially well, I would say, and are able to sort of also put it down the tee. Samsonova is one that comes to mind as well, but there's not many other players really.
Krejcikova, maybe.
Osaka, definitely, yeah, but the fact that she wasn't able to hit that serve particularly well when she last played Iga kind of put me off saying her, I guess, because certainly Samsonova did, even though she lost that match to Swiatek in Stuttgart. In this matchup, though, if you're able to hit that slider in the juice court, you take away Swiatek's ability to attack the first serve right with her forehand, which is huge. I mean, that's why Swiatek's able to rattle through return games over and over again in these finals. If you're able to do that, you give yourself a fighting chance. That's literally it. Otherwise your service games just get destroyed basically every time. So that shot is incredibly important, and her ability to stave off the forehand in general mid-rally was incredibly important. Though I think the serve for me was probably the most important one, because in the third set she won 21 of 24 first serve points against Swiatek. I'm considering going set by set for Swiatek's matches this year to find out if anybody's done anything better than that, because I highly, highly doubt it.
Yeah.
I was going to say about the forehand in general, just before I forget, to round off the matchup thoughts. She was able to defend that forehand corner so well. And it is something she can do. Generally, she's got really good feel. When she's getting attacked, she can get herself back into the point with deep shots and stuff. But it was the way she defended when she was looking like she was completely out the point. She kept the ball low sometimes with these squash shots. She was able to redirect it down the line sometimes. The squash shots in particular, for me, so impressive though. Barely ever missed out of that corner, and it resulted in Swiatek approaching the net sometimes when she would never ever do that ordinarily. So I mean, she must have really been ruffled for that sort of play to happen.
Yeah, do you remember the point at 5-1 in the second set tiebreak? Like, Krejcikova pushed Swiatek wide on the forehand. Swiatek hits this, like, ballistic angle across court that Krejcikova somehow scrapes over the net, and then Swiatek's approach shot, like, hit the top of the net and sat up, and Krejcikova wound up passing her. But that get off the angle that Swiatek hit was ridiculous. Like, I don't think many players could have done that. I couldn't believe what I was seeing there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that was probably the two things that were most impressive for me in this match from Krejcikova, definitely.
Yeah, and on the point about the sliding serve out wide, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because I've started to think that if you could pick one serve to have, I feel like that's the best one. Because if you can hit the line with it, I mean, the thing about the sliding serve out wide on the deuce side is that it jumps away from the court, right? And so that does two things, which is like it forces the returner to stretch out when they're hitting it so you get less power. And even if they get the return back, they're all the way off the court. And so I feel like if you can hit that serve well and you have the T serve, you're going to get some aces off of it because the returner has to guess. And if you can hit it well, even if they know where it's going, I think the odds that they get a great return back are really, really low. So I think that serve is going to do damage against anyone in the world.
There's one serve I can think of that's better, but it's kind of cheating. Is the sliding serve in the ad court if you're a lefty, because that if you
that's the backhand. Yeah,
exactly. That's the backhand, and obviously it's break points a lot of the time. Is what you're saving rather than normal points. So that I take that over that one, but I agree in principle, definitely that. The one other thing I wanted to elaborate on, Krejcikova's ability to deal with pressure, it's huge. I put so many thoughts on paper about this last year, and I just need to read them over again because I can't remember exactly what I had. But it was something along the lines of Krejcikova was statistically the best breakpoint saver of last year in 2021. I imagine it won't be far off this year. Her sort of unflappability on breakpoint, on match point, obviously she had 6 of them and eventually got it. And I mean, if that game had went, the way of Swiatek against any other player, I would have said Swiatek's definitely taking it. But
yeah,
it could have went to Krejcikova anyway, even if Swiatek had managed to break that game for sure, because Krejcikova just doesn't. She deals with pressure differently from like every other player on tour. Maybe Swiatek, obviously, but she's one of those sort of standouts for me.
Yeah, I mean, in that last game, like a few match points went by, and then a break point came off, and she just hit a service winner like it was nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think a lot of players there, you expect a double fault or a really slow second serve. On that last game, I wanted to talk about a couple of the match points that Swiatek saved, because, I mean, she may have lost this match. I think she sort of got gassed in the third set, like seemed to fatigue a little bit. But that last stand, returning at 3-5, was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So, like, match point number 2, she sort of, like, bosses a rally. Krejcikova plays great defense, forehand squash shots from that corner, like you said. And Swiatek hits like this weird curving forehand slice for a winner right onto the baseline. It was a sick bit of improvisation. And just to do that on match point was wild to me. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've never seen Swiatek do that before. But I suppose that was testament to the fact she was coming forward. There was another bizarre one, like up to the tiebreak, maybe at like 3-3 or something, where Swiatek comes in at 15-30. I don't know if the one, you know the one I mean, but she ends up half volleying it, like for a clean winner.
I missed that one.
It was bizarre, and it's just it's nice to see Swiatek excelling in the forecourt as well, because we won't see it often, I'll tell you that much. So yeah, it was a nice streak, definitely.
Yeah, and I think most people were most impressed with the 4th match point save, which we'll get into, but for me the best one was the 3rd one. And on this one, and like you said, Krejcikova wins 21 of 24 first serve points in this set, right?
Yeah,
so Krejcikova hits a perfect first serve down the middle. Swiatek throws herself at this thing and somehow gets back this inside-out forehand return with a ton of pace. And Krejcikova can barely even get it back, and then Swiatek puts away an easy forehand. Like, and when I say perfect serve, I mean like an inch away from both lines. Like, she could not have hit this first serve better. That is an ace against a lot of players. Mm-hmm. It's a service winner against maybe everyone except Iga Swiatek, unless you just totally guess right. But that good of a return off that good of a first serve. I said an expletive out loud when I saw that.
Yes, so did I. I was literally blown away. I was like, well, what the hell did I just watch? Obviously, that went on to be the catalyst for Swiatek winning the match. That would have went down as one of the craziest match point saves of all time. But yeah, it's just a nice match point save in the end, considering she lost. But yeah, crazy stuff.
Yeah, and I think after all that insanity, Swiatek saving 5 match points and all, the fact that it ended with an ace, I think, was just perfect, because there was no other way that it could have come to an end. And I just love matches like that, where one player just refuses to beat themselves to the extent that you have to hit the ball past them to win the match. Like, you have to hit a line. And that's what Krejcikova did. And it was just amazing on both sides.
Yeah, it's seriously peaked. Really, really enjoyed it. One stat I was talking about that might interest you on Twitter is that Krejcikova now becomes the 3rd player this year to win a title at home.
Okay.
In our home country, because it's tough, and we saw Swiatek in Warsaw obviously succumb to pressure. We saw this week even, I should say, Jabeur in Tunisia also succumbing to pressure a little bit. Both nervy performances. It's difficult to do, and Barty is the only player to have done it twice this year, in Adelaide and Melbourne, and Buzkova did it in Prague, and now Krejcikova's the 3rd, and it's testament to, again, her ability to deal with pressure and play even better because of it.
Yeah, and I think it makes it even more amazing that she sort of had that match point to break point swing and still got out of it, because I feel like at home, that's even more terrifying when you see the finish line and then it sort of gets ripped away from you a little bit. I think it's so tough to just not completely implode in that situation. And she just looks completely unfazed.
Yeah, totally. The last thing I want to say on Krejcikova is just how she plays, basically, because I think maybe some people will watch Krejcikova and not be 100% sure on why she's winning, I guess, because she doesn't smack the ball. She doesn't really smack the ball off either side. And in fact, I would say she rarely sort of accelerates on the ball. A lot of the time it's the same pace, and it's just finding the right part of the court. And it's such a good example for coaching, honestly, because it just shows you don't have to hit your way through the opponent necessarily. You just have to put the ball in the right place. She almost massages the ball into the open space a lot of the time. And a lot of that play, it makes it very surprising that she won her first slam at the French Open, for me, to be honest, because it's the kind of play that is good for hard courts. And incidentally, since winning that title, she hasn't won another title on clay, and she's won 3 on hard courts. So it's quite difficult to say. She probably doesn't have a favourite surface for me because of the way she sort of massages the ball all the time, and neither of her shots are particularly massive, neither of her shots are particularly loaded or heavy. She's just able to find the space a lot of the time, and she's got such good variety. She's such a multi-surface versatile player for me.
Yeah, and I think she times the ball exceptionally well and uses the angles. Like, I think she is capable of hitting amazing angles on both sides. And I agree with what you said, that like she doesn't really belt the ball, but that doesn't hurt her offensively. I think she had 44 winners this match against the best defender on tour, probably. Like that's fantastic. And on the matchup a little bit, I love this matchup because I think both of them are essentially without like a technical weakness from the baseline. Like, you're not going to beat either of them by like peppering one wing. Like, it's not as simple as like their forehands or their backhands will break down. And so what they both kind of had to do was just like belt the ball or like open up the court with angles until enough open space like presents itself that you can hit a winner. And I love that, because it's like you have to earn every single point. Like, you'll get unforced errors here and there, but when they're both at their best, they're going to create all these amazing patterns that don't really exist in normal tennis.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It was quite a surreal match in a lot of ways. You don't see much like it, I'd say. You're quite right. It's a very original match for the tour, and really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Here's hoping we get another edition of the rivalry soon. And so to sort of like talk about the players a bit, like, what conclusions do you draw from this? Like, not really talking about like, does this make you worried about Iga or anything? Like, I think, first final loss since 2019, but like hell of a performance from Krejcikova. Like, I don't think Swiatek has anything to worry about, but like, do you think this shows that Krejcikova could maybe be like a big rival to her going forwards? Do you think Krejcikova can get back to number 2, and how quickly? Stuff like that.
The only problem with everything I've just said about Krejcikova's game is because she doesn't possess a huge weapon. I guess it's quite difficult to see her dominating the tour, going hand in hand with Swiatek and winning just as many titles and stuff like that. It's very unlikely, because you can have players that will redline and be able to beat Krejcikova on their day, sort of thing. She's playing very, very well, but I can't see the run continuing indefinitely, I would say. So I think it will come to an end at some point. I still think top 10, definitely top 10 player, but top 5 is unlikely for me.
Okay, got it. I do think injuries could make it tough considering the luck she's had with them this year. But I don't know. I think if she can reproduce performances like that, I see her going back to where she was.
The one thing I'll add to that, actually, is I should be listening to myself, really, because I've just been talking about how much of a pressure player she is. She does have that sort of mental factor that a lot of players, obviously, at the moment in the top 10 are not missing. I don't want to be harsh, but you know what I mean. Like Sakari's sort of got those problems in the latter stages of tournaments. But Dosa at the moment is definitely feeling a little bit of a loss of form. Sabalenka, double faults, etc. Krejcikova is one of those players that could turn up at a slam and win against 7 players she should be winning against. So, maybe could happen again.
One of my favorite matches in the past couple of years was like the Roland Garros semi between Krejcikova and Sakari, and that match I don't think was one that Sakari choked. I think she did serve for it and she did play a couple nervy points, but Krejcikova hit some really, really crazy shots on big points. I think she ended up getting the break back by hitting moon balls that almost got over Sakari's head, and that opened up a lane for a really sharp angle that forced an error. And the third set of that match was just amazing.
There was a match point in there as well, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, saved with a winner, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was. I think it was I'm pretty sure it was a drive volley backhand from Krejcikova.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that speaks to the pressure player you were talking about as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll take it back. I don't think she'll be winning tons of titles, but she could win the right titles, and that could definitely put her in the top 5 again.
Yeah, I don't want to get too hyperbolic after a match like this, because I think it's so easy to be like, oh, no one's going to stop either of them. But I feel like if Krejcikova can stay healthy, I think we'll see her win another major at some point. I don't know if that's bold to say, but I feel comfortable saying that.
It's the mentality thing. I mean, the fact she's winning so many in the doubles tour as well. She's proven it time and time again that she's got the mental chops to hang with anybody. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think at some point, 10 years into the future, or even now, someone needs to write a 10,000 word feature on how she won the singles and the doubles at Roland Garros last year, and even played the mixed. And someone needs to do a study on how physically taxing that was, and ask her everything about it, because I would like to know how she did that still. That was incredible.
It's a very good point. I won't name names, but talking about title winners over the last 5 years with this person, the Krejcikova gets forgotten about in the French Open a lot of the time. I'll ask who won the 2021 French Open. It's you can name every other slam, but not that one, basically. So yeah, Krejcikova does get forgotten about quite a lot of the time by people in my circle, and it's such a shame, because it was such a good run, and it was such a good underdog story, equal to, if not in some ways surpassing. Raducanu was a proper underdog story, fine, but it was just as out of the blue in a lot of ways for me. There was no way I would have picked her, and it should be lauded, but it just kind of gets forgotten a bit.
Yeah, well, I think matches like today's will hopefully stuff like that in the future. And Iga Swiatek, as always, so hard to beat, so hard to finish off. Just great to have her as number one still. I'm so glad she's on the tour. Any closing thoughts you have about this one?
No, I think I pretty much said everything I had in my head there.
Cool. So yeah, the next match, the other match I wanted to talk about was Djokovic Medvedev yesterday. And this one was a bit weirder because it kind of abruptly ended after 2 sets. There's a bit of a weird debate, Medvedev shouldn't have done that. No, he was hurt. He did the right thing by retiring. But I think a lot of really, really fascinating things happened in those first 2 sets. I don't really think the injury affected the quality of play. And so I think there's a lot to talk about here as well. What were your thoughts on that one?
Tons. One of the matches of the year. I was saying that in the chat. One of the matches of the year that didn't happen, right? It was great. The level was so good. And yeah, just adding to that before we actually dive into the match, Medvedev said that if he continued to play, he he felt as though he could have risked missing half the year or so rather than a month. And he said if he had won, he wouldn't have played the final. Like, it was that bad. So yeah, fine. Medvedev's not one to mess around with that sort of thing, is he? He wouldn't lie about that.
This was his first one in like years or something.
He said that as well. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so must have been a legitimate worry, obviously. Such a good match. But first thing I was going to say was when Medvedev did retire, the reaction from Djokovic. I loved that. Just he was properly like he was just so taken aback. He wanted to play that third set so badly. Like, he was so keen.
That was what stuck out to me too. Like, I think it's not that he wasn't sympathetic, because I think he was, but like, if I could sort of explain his facial expression in words, it was almost like he was saying like, oh, come on, like, this was just getting good.
I know you can't do that to me. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
And that was so nice to see, because my favorite Djokovic is like hungry, motivated Djokovic, like playing matches like this. And so to me, that was sort of like, oh, he's back, like, he's still here. And that was quite nice.
Yeah, definitely. It's just it's testament. I don't think anybody ever really doubts Djokovic's intentions in the core and he's in it for the money or anything. But in case they did, that's quite a good evidence that he's in it for the fight and he's in it for the glory. He just loves that sort of the fight, like Nadal does, I guess, in that sort of way. Just lovely to see.
Yeah. So like, it was kind of weird for me watching this match because the quality was fantastic, but I kind of felt like it had some sad undertones to it, because I kept thinking back to and I wrote about this, which you read, so I'll be repeating myself a little bit.
No, sorry. Yours is first.
But I was thinking back to the match they played in Paris at the end of last year, which was another great match, won by Djokovic in 3 from a set down. And that match, like, always just stuck in my head because those two split all 4 majors that year, Djokovic winning 3. And the play the entire time felt sort of like light and happy, because it was intense, but it was almost like they were playing without pressure because they knew the guy in front of them was the only one they had to worry about for the next while. And it felt like 2022 was shaping up to be huge for both of them. And that didn't end up happening. Djokovic won Wimbledon, but that's really the best thing you can say about either of their years. I think they both underachieved for a variety of reasons, both within their control and not. And so, like, watching this match made me a bit sad because they were playing at, I think, the same level they did in Paris. But I think that vision of the future is kind of gone. Like, Nadal had a great year. Alcaraz is, just going to eat everything at some point. And so now, like, I don't really think there's a universe in which, like, those two are going to dominate, at least not to the extent that it seems like they would at the end of last year.
Yeah, and obviously Medvedev was saying as well, it's the second tournament this year that they've both played, Roland Garros being the other one, which is absolutely wild, obviously. I would relay that sentiment. It just feels like the two of them should have been on track to play each other a ton this year, and just hasn't happened. Yeah,
like you could watch that match and think like, oh, this is number 1 and number 2. And then you look at the ranking, it's like, no, Medvedev is 4 and Djokovic is 7. Like, that doesn't sound right. Like, what the hell
wild.
is that?
It's actually wild.
Yeah, but I think aside from that, like, the tennis was so good. Like, I think Medvedev in the first set was just a wall. Like, he made 3 unforced errors, and Djokovic couldn't hit through him. Like, Medvedev blocked everything back, broke him twice, served incredibly well the whole match. As close to peak as we've seen from him in a long time.
Definitely. I'll start with the RBA match beforehand just for context, because his demolition of RBA 6-1, 6-1 in the match before. I put out that stat on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it on, but just to give that to the listeners, Medvedev hit 12 errors, and I believe 9 of them, I suppose, if you discount the double fault, because it's not a ground stroke error, I should say. So 11 ground stroke errors, 8 of them were forced. So balls you wouldn't expect Medvedev to make. 3 of them were unforced, and he hit 303 ground strokes overall without the forced errors. So you're talking a 1 in 100 unforced error rate. So that's 99 balls and then 1 missed ball, basically, unmakeable balls, which is just absolute baseline insanity. It's not human. It's inhuman.
It's nuts. Yeah. And like, he gets compared to Djokovic a lot, and Djokovic is better at a lot of things, like dictating with the forehands and a bunch of other stuff. But like, in this aspect of the game, like, I think Medvedev is better, right? At just like never leaking errors. Like, I don't know if Djokovic has ever been able to lock down like that.
Yeah, his backhand's more solid than than Djokovic's. There's no doubt. There's no doubt. And honestly, if that makes it better, there's matches where the backhand exchange has been won by Medvedev, and that's why he's won the match. So you could argue that Medvedev's backhand is better. It's definitely better in some situations, like on a slow hard court. It's better because you can't hit through the other opponent with your backhand. Whose is the most solid? It's Medvedev's. So it was Djokovic that was forced to come up with a different play. So there's a lot of the arguments you could make for why Medvedev isn't as good as Djokovic is, whatever, but certainly in this matchup on this court, 18 unforced errors from Djokovic's backhand, and I don't know, like, what was it, 2 or 3 or something from Medvedev's, something like that.
He made 11 unforced errors the whole match, and so I guess 8 of those would have been in the second set, but brutal set, like, so still very good.
Yeah, incredible. I was going to flesh out that thought about slow hard courts and why it's just a nightmare for anybody to play Medvedev on them. Obviously, we've seen Monte Carlo previously where Daniel was able to win that as well, and obviously that's a clay court. You maybe would expect Djokovic as the better clay court to win that, but it's the same sort of dynamic. You slow it down, and Djokovic doesn't have anywhere to hit through Medvedev, and he defends it with that forehand corner really well when the play's slow enough. Like, you look at Australia when they played in 2021, and it was a complete routing because when Djokovic is able to play in faster conditions, he's actually the favourite in a lot of ways, despite Medvedev's serve, because obviously Djokovic serves incredibly well anyway. The slice as well, it doesn't seem to work as well against Medvedev anymore. He's obviously been training for that for ages, because at the start of the year, I remember him playing Berrettini in the ATP Cup, and I thought maybe Berrettini would have some sort of matchup advantage, but he deals with the slice so well now. He can get it back into play really deep. He doesn't use much height over the net at all. He's happy to bunt it back into play as well. So it's just, it was ineffective. The slice didn't work at all. So I thought maybe that could have worked, but it didn't at all. Djokovic was forced to come up with something a bit different, and the biggest thing for me, the game changer, was the drop shot, and it worked really well. It's the in the last 6 matches they've played, it's the most drop shots per point played that Djokovic has played against Medvedev. So it gives you an idea of how much he was grasping, how much he was clutching for something tactically a little different. Yeah,
and last year in Paris it was the serve and volley, but like you said about the consistency, like, as good as Djokovic is at this, and like maybe 10 years ago he would be happy to play Medvedev's game, as he is now, like, he can't do it. Like, Medvedev is better at the war of attrition, at least in the short term. And so Djokovic needs to look for, like, backdoors, like not cutting corners, but like little tactical quirks like that he can use. Although I do want to say, like, and I don't think Medvedev's injury was like really caused by fatigue, but I do think that Medvedev's wall mode thing, like, I think he needs to get a little better at dictating, because as good as he was at it, like, Djokovic is so relentless at bossing points. Like, I think people still underrate how good he is offensively. Like, he will run you from corner to corner all day. And so as good as Medvedev is at neutralizing that, I don't think that's how he should want to play a 3-hour match, or even a 2-hour match. You know what I mean? Like, I think midway through the second set, I felt like I could see that it was finally starting to get to him a little bit. And with his game, I don't really think he has an alternative. Like, he's not going to start blasting away at forehands. We saw that volley at 5-all. Like, he's not going to start hitting these beautiful volleys to finish points. Djokovic is not the best at it, but he can do that. And so I feel like if Medvedev gets tired against Djokovic, he's kind of screwed.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, on a hard court against RBA and against Djokovic, there isn't much of a recipe for somebody of Medvedev's build. Well, okay, RBA, let's take RBA out of it. Djokovic on a hard court. How do you beat Djokovic on a hard court? I mean, without a backhand of absolute steel. It's kind of difficult to say, to be honest, because I don't think anybody has a formula against him better than
blast away at the open court, but that's too low margin. Doesn't work for anyone.
Exactly. Yeah. Zverev maybe is the only other guy that can sort of do the same thing as Medvedev, but maybe a little bit more aggressively. Fine, but anybody else.
I do want to see what Alcaraz can do, because I feel like him with the drop shot, he can probably defend as well at this point, and more offensive power. I want to see what he can do. But yeah, I feel like, I think the Medvedev recipe is kind of as good as it gets right now.
Yeah, I imagine if Alcaraz and Djokovic had played in the final of this tournament, Djokovic would have been the favourite for sure. On a faster hardcourt, I would probably make Alcaraz the favourite, because, when the conditions get quick and Alcaraz is able to go as offensive as he likes,
it just can't catch up.
Yeah, it's pretty much unplayable. Exactly. So yeah, it'd be really, really interesting to see them play in Australia.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think we need that match.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see right now.
Yeah.
Djokovic Alcaraz in best of 5 on hard court. But yeah, like even though I do think Medvedev should have been able to sneak this one out, even with the injury happening, because like 5-all, he didn't just have that volley on top of the net. He had a short backhand. Short meaning like on top of the service line. If he had gone inside out, would have been a clean winner. But he hit it right at Djokovic, and even then should have finished off the point with a volley, dumps it into the net. Not great. I think he needs to improve his touch, but he was still the better player in the second set. Like he was cruising on serve the entire time.
Yeah, I'd say so too, and that's what I mean by Djokovic having to clutch for something a little different. That's why I was thinking, I was saying that in the chat. I felt like if it had gone to a third set, Medvedev would have been the favourite because it was Djokovic that had to come up with something a bit different, play lower risk shots, high risk shots, sorry. And to be fair, like Djokovic can play low percentage shots and come out trumps because he's such a good player, to be fair. So yeah, maybe it would have been about 50-50 in some ways, but yeah, I still think Medvedev was playing the safer tennis and getting the rewards for it, so it could have been his for sure.
Yeah, and you know, that said, like, and this is not anything new, but credit to Djokovic for the pressure point play, because like how he managed to sneak out a set against this version of Medvedev is beyond me, because Medvedev made 75% of first serves, 26 winners, 11 on forced errors. He won 63% of points played on his second serve, over 70% of points played on his first serve, and he only won one of 2 sets. How is that possible? Like, and I know like we're not talking about forced errors, but like, still, I don't understand how that's possible. It's amazing.
Yeah, he couldn't have played a better set, really, could he?
No.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, and in the clutch, like 6-all in the tiebreak, Djokovic, who I think was sort of struggling with being a bit passive at times in the match, just, you know, accelerates into this inside-in forehand and then puts away a smash like it was nothing. You know, he did exactly what he had to do in the moment, as he has done for so many years now.
It was jaw-dropping. It's so bizarre as talking about this match like it's one of the best of the season. It is one of the best of the season, but it was a retirement. It's just, it doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, like, I would have liked to see a third set, but it's interesting because I feel like even though it was 2 sets, I feel like it did still feel like a whole match because it was long and it was even. So yeah, I think it's good, like, fodder for analysis anyway.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just glad that they both played well because I feel like after their seasons, they both kind of needed it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Djokovic's season now is just insane. It's getting to that time of the year again. I've got a few stats about his post-US Open in general, like the last 10 years. 151 wins to 18 losses post-US Open since 2012. So that's 21 titles. I mean, he plays about a quarter of his season post-US Open, right? But that's about a third of his titles coming from that segment of the year. It's 89% win rate compared to 86% elsewhere. In that time, it's his hunting ground, definitely.
Yeah. What do you expect from these guys next year?
Djokovic he's there, isn't he? If he can play tournaments, then he could easily win multiple slams. He'd probably beat odds on to win multiple slams, right? Medvedev, difficult because this is the first tournament in a long time where I felt pretty confident about his form. He, previous to this tournament, was really, really worrying me under pressure. Statistically, he was really, really bad on break points, considering how sort of high a bar he'd set himself last year. He was the tour leader, in fact, for break points converted, and just plummeted basically. So I felt like he was dealing with not nerves, I guess, I don't know, just a loss of focus. The double fault issues in big matches and stuff were plaguing him for a little while. This is the first tournament where I felt confident about him, so I'm trying not to let recency bias affect me too much and put it in context, because it's been a relatively poor season for him, and this might just be a flash in the pan. I've got no idea really.
Yeah. With Djokovic, are you concerned at all about how he might fare in best of 5? Sort of thinking back to when he came back for the clay season, and it took him a few tournaments to sort of like find his endurance again. And I don't even know if he had it back by Roland Garros, because I do think he gassed out a bit against Nadal. Do you think he's sort of going to have to go through that again in 2023, or do you expect him to just come back like as he did in this match?
Yeah, Yeah, I think he's like the best player at just turning up to tournaments he's comfortable at and playing like he's never left. So if he rocks up to Australia and he's not had much experience or form, I guess, or whatever, I don't think it'll matter.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I think I'm a little less optimistic about him than most people seem to be. Like, I think if he's at his best, he'll win the Australian Open. Like, he'll beat Alcaraz in like 5 or a close 4 or something. But I feel like if he's anything less than that, he'll get beaten by Alcaraz or Medvedev or someone. So I don't know. Like, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. Like, I've been impressed with him the past few weeks, but I don't know. I'm not completely sure how much these matches matter right now.
Yeah, it's fair. I don't know if I've got many other thoughts about Djokovic. There's not much point talking about that final because it would be a bit of a damp squib considering the match we've just talked about, right?
Yeah, so, we can review it briefly. I guess like I think my issue with it was just that like we didn't learn anything new about either player. Like
exactly.
It was basically exactly how you would guess it was going to happen. Like Djokovic will probably win in straights, probably not get broken, probably not face a break point. And look, like credit to Tsitsipas for making the final. I think the match against Rublev was very good. I think winning that from a set down was not easy, but yeah, I think certain hard courts, most hard courts against Djokovic, Tsitsipas just doesn't have enough to hurt him with. He won 7 points on the return in 2 sets.
Jesus,
I can't defend that.
That's mad. Yeah, guess has Djokovic got his third 6-3, 6-4 final win over Tsitsipas, by the way.
Right, Madrid and Dubai, other ones.
Yeah. Well done. Yeah. So just, I don't know if he didn't. I imagine he didn't get broken in those 2 matches as well, but it's just quite typical. Basically, exactly what we expected.
Yeah, and it's sort of like what you were talking about with like, what is the game plan on hard court? Like with Tsitsipas, analysts are going to be like, oh, he needs to be aggressive, and it's like, yeah, but what happens when he starts missing? Because it's going to happen. Because no one can. Because it's going to happen to anyone. Like there's no plan B because there's nothing to attack.
Yeah, there's literally nothing he can do at the moment anyway. In this form, it's pretty sad for him. It's just not a good matchup. He should have done better in the Rome final, to be honest. Like he's quite a good. He's a good matchup for Djokovic on clay, but on hard courts, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think peak Djokovic on a hard court, it's sort of tough to play in a different way that like Nadal is on clay, because like Nadal has the bigger weapons, and so like he's going to destroy you more offensively when he's at his best.
Yeah.
But like even against Nadal on clay, you kind of know what you have to do. Like, and it's impossible in certain situations. Like you can't hit backhands on the rise and hit them flat and deep into all corners of the court. It's just not going to work. But like, you know that if you do that, like good things will happen. And against Djokovic on a hard court, it's like there's literally nowhere to go. Like maybe you hit like one improbable running forehand winner down the line, but like you're going to miss that 9 times out of 10. He's going to hit deeper than you. Pace doesn't bother him. Like he can take the ball early on either side. Like in some ways, I think it's tougher. Even though Nadal has like more trophies on clay.
You're more likely to get double bageled by Nadal on a clay court, than Djokovic on a hard court because he just kind of rolls. I mean, he doesn't need to do anything apart from serve how he normally serves. He'll return properly for like 2 service games and. That's you. It's just that's what happened to Tsitsipas in like all 3 of those finals. So,
and I think the thing that explains the disparity between like Nadal's dominance on clay and Djokovic's on hard court is that like Nadal is better at hitting his peak. Like I think he can do it more easily. Like I think with Djokovic it happens less often, but when it does happen, it's just like. I mean, every time I think it gets people to say like this is the highest level in tennis history. Like the 2 sets he played against Federer at the 2016 Australian Open, or like the final against Nadal in Doha that year, or like the 2019 Australian Open final. Like people watch that, and I think like the GOAT takes always just start flying because they see that, and it's just like you can't play tennis better than that. And of course, the flip side is like I don't think Djokovic has a whole lot of control over when that happens. Like it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, like anyone is screwed.
Yeah, you're quite right. Yeah. I don't know if I've got any more words to say about Djokovic in this tournament. It's just another classic end of year tournament for Djokovic.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's all I have as well. Like I mainly just wanted to talk about the Ostrava final and this Medvedev Djokovic match. So yeah, like I'm glad we're getting good tennis at the end of the year because I feel like the way the calendar is structured, like we're really lucky when that happens because these players are tired. They deserve their rest.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is and I'd been a little burned out after the US Open, so this helps.
It's getting busy as well. Like there's some really big tournaments coming up. So ideally, obviously, we've got a lovely set of tournaments in the interim. They've been really, really entertaining. But there is some really good stuff coming up. So it would be a real shame if we didn't get some big matches in there. I mean, we've got Guadalajara, I think, in literally 2 weeks on the WTA side. Paris Masters coming up, ATP Finals, WTA Finals, Billie Jean King Cup, Davis Cup. Yeah, it's quite a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, here's hoping we get some more like marquee matchups in these, because I feel like that's the best part of this part of the year is like when two big players like show up against each other, and then you get great matches like the ones we talked about.
Yeah, ATP Finals I'm looking forward to so much. It's just a shame, obviously, we're not going to get a Djokovic team match, but you know, yeah. I'm sure there'll be I'm sure there'll be some other great matchups there.
Yeah, we should cut this off now because I can talk about how I'm sad about Dominic's team for the next 20 minutes. I have hope for him in 2023. But yeah, Jack, thanks for joining me. This was fun. Illuminating as always with the stats. You always bring something up that I didn't know.
Yeah, no worries, on. Thanks so much for having me.